You know, there's a very curious thing happening in our age. Everyone, it seems, is desperate to be certain that they are awake. We used to chase wealth, then we chased happiness, now we chase enlightenment, and we want a receipt for it. People write to me and say, Alan, how do I know I've awakened? And I must laugh, not because it's a foolish question, but because it shows the whole trick we've been playing on ourselves. The moment you need to know, you've stepped right back into the dream. You see, our modern minds have become obsessed with validation. We want spiritual experiences to be peer-reviewed, preferably by someone with a website and a certificate. We ask, have I transcended the ego yet? As though it were an item on a to-do list. We record our meditations, post them online, and then check the comments to see if anyone else can feel our awakening. We have mistaken the reflection for the light, and this is the beautiful irony of it. The genuine awakening hides itself from the one who tries to prove it. The more we look for signs, the more the signs dissolve into smoke. It's as if the universe is saying, you still think there's a you who can be enlightened? Let's play a little longer. Because the proof we crave belongs to the very dream from which awakening frees us. The modern person wants certainty, the way a fish wants proof of the ocean. Imagine a fish swimming up to the coral reef, saying, "Excuse me, could someone show me evidence of water?" And the reef whispers, "My dear, you are made of it." But the fish frowns and says, "That's not enough. I want something I can measure." This is the predicament of our so-called spiritual civilization. We want to measure mystery. So you see, the problem isn't that people aren't awake. It's that they've been hypnotized into thinking awakening must look like something. They imagine a golden aura, a perpetual smile, a life where all problems have politely vanished. And when they look in the mirror and see only their ordinary face, a little tired, a little worried, they say, not yet, with a cap in it. But tell me, what could be more miraculous than this face right now, this breath, this very moment of looking? If you can see the miracle in the ordinary, you've already stepped through the gate. Now, I'm not mocking our desire to understand. It's quite natural. After all, the mind is a marvelous instrument, always categorizing, comparing, collecting. But it's like trying to pour the sea into a teacup. You can collect a few drops, but the ocean refuses to be contained. The truth of awakening is not an idea that can be verified. It's the collapse of the need to verify. You see, in the West, we've been raised on the notion that knowledge gives us power, and it does up to a point. We learn to dissect, to analyze, to dominate nature through knowing. But now we want to dominate spirit in the same way, to pin down the infinite and label it like a butterfly. And the infinite simply laughs, because the moment you've caught it, it isn't infinite anymore. The proof of awakening is that you no longer seek proof. The evidence is that you stop looking for evidence. It's not something you get. It's something you notice was never missing. It's the quiet realization that all your searching was the universe pretending to forget itself so it could enjoy remembering again. And perhaps the deepest irony of all is this. Even your doubt, that restless little question whispering, "Have I really awakened?" is part of the same play. The doubt is the divine teasing itself, just to keep the story interesting. Because if you saw clearly from the start that you were the whole thing all along, you might die of laughter before breakfast. So instead of hunting for signs and confirmations, relax, sit quietly, and notice what's already happening. The breath breathes itself. Thoughts appear like clouds and drift away. The world hums without needing your supervision. What more awakening could there be than this effortless being? When you cease asking whether you're awake, you'll find you never really slept. You see, one of the great jokes the universe plays on us is the idea of becoming. We are born into a world that teaches us from the very first day that life is a ladder and the rungs are endless. As children, we're told to become good students, then to become successful adults, then to become spiritual, wise, enlightened, always becoming, never being. And so we hurry along, panting and sweating, trying to reach that elusive moment when we will finally arrive, but the finish line keeps moving, doesn't it? You go to school to prepare for college, college to prepare for work, work to prepare for retirement, and retirement to prepare for heaven. And then, just as you finally sit down to enjoy the view, someone whispers, "You haven't made it yet." It's a marvelous system, marvelous because it keeps you running forever. And this is what I call the hoax of becoming. Now, this same pattern has crept into our spiritual life. We've turned enlightenment into the ultimate self-improvement project. We treat awakening as though it were the final badge to earn, the grand prize at the end of the cosmic video game. But the paradox is, the moment you chase awakening, you affirm the very illusion that hides it. You're like a dog running after its own tail. The faster it spins, the dizzier it gets. The truth, you see, is not in the future. It never was. You can't arrive at what you already are. Trying to become enlightened is like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. You are already the seeing, the awareness that notices the trying. So long as there is a me who wants to reach a state, there will be an endless gap between the seeker and the sought. And that gap is what we call time. Time, in this sense, is not just clocks and calendars. It's the psychological delay we invent between here and there, between me and it. But the awakened see that there is no there. There is only here endlessly unfolding, self-renewing, dancing with itself. The game of becoming collapses when you realize there's nowhere to go, because you've never left. When I was young, I used to believe that spiritual life was about self-improvement. I would read holy books, practice meditations, sit for hours, thinking that if I tried hard enough, I'd polish this ego into a diamond. But over time, it became clear that polishing the ego only makes it shinier. It doesn't make it disappear. And one day, I simply laughed, because it dawned on me that awakening isn't about adding anything new. It's about subtracting what isn't true. Imagine a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble. He doesn't add a statue, he removes what isn't the statue. In the same way, enlightenment isn't something you create. It's what's left when the false idea of becoming falls away. You peel off every layer of identity, the student, the worker, the seeker, the achiever, until what remains is this naked presence that was never going anywhere. And this is why striving never works. Because striving depends on the belief that you are separate from what you seek. It's like waves trying to reach the ocean. But the wave is the ocean, moving in a particular shape for a while. When it sees this, it stops trying to become water. It laughs and dances instead. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with effort. You can meditate, study, practice, but do it as play, not as duty. If you meditate to get something, you've missed the flavor of it. But if you meditate the way birds sing or the rain falls for no reason at all, then you are tasting what awakening truly is. It's effortless effort, work without strain, action without anxiety. You see, the universe itself isn't trying to become something. It isn't in a hurry. The tree doesn't strain to grow leaves. The flower doesn't sweat to bloom. They express their nature without asking why. The same intelligence that moves the tides moves your lungs. You are the process, not the product. The cosmic joke is that you've been it the whole time, pretending you were on the way. So when you find yourself longing to become awakened, pause and notice what's happening. There's awareness of the longing, isn't there? That awareness, not the longing, is the awakening itself. The rest is just the mind trying to turn infinity into a project plan. And here lies the great relief. You can stop rushing. You can stop improving. You can stop trying to get somewhere other than where you are. Because the very thing you're chasing is what's been chasing you through every breath, every thought, every mistake, every triumph. The whole journey was the universe finding creative ways to remind itself of what it already knew. That it has never been divided, never been lost, never been less than complete. Now, let's turn to the matter of proof again, but from a subtler angle. People are forever asking, how do I know if I'm truly awake? They want a sign, a moment, an experience, a symbol they can hold up and say, this is it. But the genuine signal of awakening is the one thing that cannot be displayed, because the instant you try to show it, you've already disguised it. It's rather like laughter. The more you try to laugh, the less funny it becomes. You cannot force a laugh that's real. Because laughter, like awakening, happens when you forget to control it. It comes uninvited, spontaneous, innocent, and the people who are genuinely awake are precisely like that, unself-conscious, natural, unadvertised. They don't look the part. They don't wear the costume. They're not straining to radiate serenity. Their peace is not performance, it's presence. You see, the true signal of awakening is ordinariness. It's the absence of trying to appear spiritual. When a person no longer needs to defend their image, no longer has to prove their purity or wisdom, then you can feel something uncontrived, effortless, alive. They're not running away from life, they're participating in it, fully and freely, as if the whole show were a piece of divine improvisation. People often mistake awakening for a kind of supernatural glow, halos and humming energy fields. But no, no, no. It's not what shines around you, it's what shines through you. It's the lightness that comes when the burden of being somebody slips off your shoulders. It's the laughter that bursts forth when you realize you've been taking your mask too seriously. Think of a great actor on stage who suddenly remembers it's a play. He doesn't storm off in disgust. Oh, this isn't real. No, he keeps playing, but now he's free. He knows he's acting, and that knowledge fills him with joy, not cynicism. The awakened person lives that way, fully engaged, yet inwardly untouched. They know that life is both utterly serious and utterly playful, and because they see that paradox clearly, they can love it without needing to escape it. Now, here's where the ego gets very clever. It hears all this and says, I see. So if I can act effortless, I'll look awakened. And off it goes, designing a new identity, calm voice, faraway smile, minimalist wardrobe, maybe a Sanskrit tattoo for good measure. But you can always feel the tension, the performance. It's like watching someone meditate angrily. It doesn't quite work. Because the ego can imitate behavior, but it cannot imitate freedom from imitation. The real signal is invisible precisely because it's everywhere. It's not what you do. It's the absence of the inner commentator saying, look how well I'm doing it. It's when your life stops being about proving anything at all. You see, in that moment, the mind relaxes its grip. There's no self to defend, no image to protect, no future to guarantee. You simply are, and that beingness radiates without intention. People feel it around such a person, not as authority or aura, but as ease. They feel safe, seen, allowed, and this is why awakening cannot be marketed, branded, or mass-produced. You can't turn it into a lifestyle. You can sell the robes, the incense, the crystals, but you can't sell the silence that sees through them all. That silence is the signal. It doesn't shout, I am awake. It hums quietly through everything, even your confusion. It's what hears these words right now. When you taste this silence, even for a moment, you realize that awakening has nothing to do with becoming special. It's the end of specialness. It's not about rising above others, it's about sinking fully into what already is. And what you find there is astonishingly simple. This breath, this sound, this movement of thought is it. You've never been apart from it for even a second. So the next time you wonder, am I awake? Notice what's asking the question. The one who wants the answer, that's the dreamer. But the awareness that hears the question, that effortless noticing, that is awakening itself. And you can't fake that, because it isn't something you do. It's what remains when doing stops, when pretending ends, when there's nothing left to prove. And perhaps the sweetest part of all is that this signal was never hidden. It was humming beneath every thought, every fear, every doubt, every silly little search. The game was never to find it, only to stop ignoring it. And when that happens, life itself becomes the evidence. No certificate, no halo, no posture, just the spontaneous ease of being what you've always been. You know, it's a very funny thing what happens once the ego catches wind of enlightenment. It says, splendid, that sounds marvelous, let's make it mine. And so, the very thing that awakening dissolves, the me that must achieve, improve, and display, rushes in to take charge of the process. It begins designing a new version of itself, a better one, the spiritual self. Now, this spiritual self can be quite charming. It speaks softly, dresses tastefully, smells faintly of sandalwood, and uses words like energy and vibration as if they were currencies in some cosmic stock exchange. It posts pictures of sunsets with captions like, just being. It curates enlightenment the way others curate fashion. And we look at it and think, Now, that's an awakened person. But you see, that's exactly the trick. The ego has found another mask to wear, only this one has a halo painted on it. And it's far more dangerous than ordinary pride, because it hides behind the appearance of humility. It says, I am nobody, but secretly means, and that makes me very special indeed. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with meditation, yoga mats, incense, or sacred words. They're lovely, poetic tools. But the moment we imagine that the symbols are the substance, we've lost the plot. The map isn't the territory, the menu isn't the meal, the mantra isn't the silence. When the form becomes more important than the freedom it was meant to point to, we've turned spirit into fashion. You see, the universe doesn't care what outfit your awakening wears. It doesn't care whether you chant in Sanskrit, pray in Latin, or whistle in the shower. What matters is the honesty of the seeing, not the costume you wear while seeing. Real awakening is not respectable. It doesn't fit into any brand or belief system. It laughs at both gurus and skeptics alike, because it knows they're just two masks of the same actor. And isn't it marvelous how clever the actor is? The divine self can play the role of the materialist, the mystic, the scientist, the saint, and get completely lost in the part. That's how convincing the show is. The trouble only begins when one mask says to another, my mask is holier than yours. That's when we take the play too seriously. We start forming clubs, temples, and online courses to protect the sanctity of our costume. But beneath the robes and rituals, it's still the same consciousness peeking through the eye holes, pretending to be separate. And this pretending is not a sin, it's a performance. The whole universe is theatrical by nature. Planets spin, stars explode, creatures evolve, all of it an endless choreography of contrast and surprise. So the problem isn't that we play roles, it's that we forget we're playing them. Awakening, therefore, is not the destruction of the stage, it's remembering that you're an actor in the cosmic drama. Once you remember, you can play with grace, because you know the lines aren't personal anymore. But, the ego says, yes, yes, I understand. I'll just play my role consciously. And off it goes again, announcing to the world how conscious it's become. This is the spiritual influencer of our time preaching detachment while refreshing their analytics page. It's the game of pretending not to be playing, and it's delightfully absurd. So what do we do about it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because even the pretending is part of the play. Even the delusion belongs to the dance. If you can see the joke, if you can laugh kindly at your own posturing, you're already free of it. You've turned self-importance into self-amusement, and that laughter, that lightness, is the surest sign of wisdom. You see, the real spiritual person doesn't stand out in the crowd. They blend in. They don't try to convert anyone, or correct anyone, or perform enlightenment like a concert pianist. They simply live fully, foolishly, joyfully. They can pray, or curse, meditate, or dance, teach, or remain silent, and it all comes from the same place, ease. They know that divinity doesn't need a brand identity, because in the end, the truest expression of awakening isn't found on a bookshelf or in a retreat. It's found in the ordinary miracle of breathing without trying, laughing without reason, loving without effort. It's not something you display to the world. It's what the world displays through you. So if you catch yourself thinking, I must look enlightened, have a good laugh. You're watching God play dress up again, and this time the costume is you. You see, all this talk of awakening, of proof, of spiritual masks and ego games, it all circles around one fundamental illusion, that there is a separate self doing all of this. That somewhere behind your eyes, inside your head, there is a little you, sitting at the control center, thinking your thoughts, feeling your feelings, steering the body like a ship through the sea of life. But this you, this inner operator, has never been found. Search for it long enough, and you begin to discover that the driver's seat is empty. And that discovery can be both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying, because we've spent our whole lives protecting this imaginary controller, polishing it, defending it, improving it. Liberating, because when you realize it isn't there, an enormous weight falls off your shoulders. You no longer have to keep the universe running. You see, you've been taught since childhood that you are an independent fragment, a lonely little bubble of consciousness floating in an alien universe. but that was never true. It's a useful fiction, good for practical purposes like having a name so the tax office knows where to find you, but metaphysically speaking, it's nonsense. There is no inside and outside in the way we imagine. When you breathe in, the air becomes you. When you breathe out, you become the air. The boundary between self and world is as thin as a thought. And yet, we cling to it. We insist on being me. We say, I'm in here and the world is out there, as though we were two separate things facing each other across a window pane. But there is no window pane. There's only one continuous process, a universe aware of itself from countless points of view. Think of a wave rising on the ocean. The wave says, look at me. I'm separate. I'm unique. I'm reaching higher than all the others. And for a little while, it's true the wave has form, it has motion, but the moment it tries to grasp its separateness, it collapses back into the sea. It realizes it was never apart, only pretending for the sake of the play. And that is what happens in awakening. The wave remembers it was never anything but water. Now, this doesn't mean the personality disappears. You still have your name, your quirks, your sense of humor, your favorite tea, but you no longer mistake these for your essence. They're costumes, delightful and temporary. You play your role without fear because you know the stage is made of you. And when the curtain falls, you don't panic, you bow, smile, and let the next act begin. This collapse of the separate self isn't an act of destruction, it's an act of recognition. You recognize that what you've been calling I is simply the universe expressing itself at a particular angle. The tree doesn't say, I grow leaves. The leaves happen by themselves. The stars don't say, I shine. They shine because that's what they are. And you, my friend, do not live life. Life lives you. But here's where it gets tricky, because the mind can hear this and say, yes, yes, I understand. I am the universe. And immediately, the old ego sneaks back in, wearing a cosmic crown. It wants to possess even unity. It says, now that I've realized oneness, I am enlightened. You see the joke? It's still the same I, trying to own what cannot be owned. True awakening doesn't inflate the ego. It dissolves it like salt in water. It doesn't make you feel bigger. It makes you vanish altogether, leaving only what was always here, awareness itself. And awareness has no borders, no nationality, no agenda. It is the space in which everything arises, thoughts, feelings, mountains, galaxies, all shimmering momentary patterns in the same infinite dance. When this realization dawns, something extraordinary happens. Your fear of death begins to fade, because you see that what dies was never you. Bodies change, thoughts flicker, worlds appear and disappear, but that which knows them remains untouched. You don't cling anymore. You don't need to hold on, because there's nothing to lose. You were never born as a thing, so you can never truly die as one. And what a relief that is, to no longer carry the burden of being an isolated self, forever defending, forever comparing, forever chasing permanence in a world that refuses to sit still. You can finally rest not in resignation, but in wonder. You can laugh at the cosmic game, knowing you are both the player and the board. You are not in the universe, you are the universe in the act of seeing itself through human eyes. When you really see this, not just as an idea, but as a living, breathing truth, your whole relationship to life changes. Every encounter becomes a meeting of the one with itself. You see the divine peeking out from behind every face, even the unpleasant ones. You see that the birds singing outside and the thought arising inside are made of the same silence. And you realize it was never about me awakening, it was life awakening to itself. Now, you might imagine that once this marvelous realization dawns, that you and the universe are not two, everything would be smooth sailing from there on out. You'd walk around glowing like a light bulb, humming with peace, and never again worry about anything at all. But that isn't quite how it goes, because the old character, the I, the little inner manager, doesn't vanish without putting up a good show first. It clings, it argues, it bargains. It says, hold on a second. I've been running this operation for decades. You can't just dissolve me in a weekend retreat. You see, the ego is a most convincing storyteller. It doesn't want to die, and why should it? It's been the star of the movie. To realize it was never real feels, to it, like being written out of the script. So it fights for its existence in the only way it knows how, by pretending to cooperate. It begins saying things like, "Ah, yes, I understand now. I am not the ego. I am awareness. We're," and of course, the irony is delicious, that's still the ego speaking, but now wearing spiritual robes and quoting the Upanishads. The ego will even use enlightenment as its last disguise. It says, "I am awakened, and that makes me holier than you, poor, unenlightened souls." And the moment it says that, it has fallen back into the oldest illusion of all, separation. That's how clever it is. It can make humility itself into pride. But you mustn't be harsh with it. Don't make war on the ego, because to fight it is to become it again. The moment you say, "I must destroy the ego," who is the one doing the destroying? It's the same fellow, now pretending to be the destroyer of himself. So, you see, you can't defeat the ego any more than a shadow can chase itself away. The trick is simply to see it, to recognize its games, its disguises, and in that seeing, it begins to lose its grip. The ego is like a child who's been pretending to be king. You don't punish the child, you smile and say, "What a fine game you've been playing." And when the child sees your smile, it knows it's safe to stop pretending. In the same way, when you look upon your own ego with gentle amusement instead of judgment, it relaxes. It softens. It stops fighting quite so hard to keep the story going. And this is when something truly beautiful happens. You begin to watch the mind like weather. Thoughts come and go like clouds. Emotions rise and fall like tides. The personality continues, but it's transparent now, not solid. You see the play of opposites, pride and shame, desire and fear, all moving within awareness, and none of it sticks. You no longer say, "I am angry," you say, "Anger is happening." You no longer say, "I am afraid." You say, "Fear is passing through." And you become the open sky rather than the storm. Now, the ego will still try to reassert itself from time to time. Oh, yes, it's a tenacious little creature. It will whisper, "Surely I should be making progress by now." It will ask for reassurance, for measurable improvement, for confirmation that it's doing this awakening thing correctly. And the very moment you notice that, you can smile, because the noticing itself is freedom. You don't have to stop the thought. You just see it for what it is, another wave passing over the surface of the sea. You see, awakening doesn't annihilate the ego like a bomb destroys a city. It simply makes it transparent, like glass. The light of awareness shines through it, unobstructed. The old habits may still appear, fear, pride, impatience, but they no longer define you. They no longer hypnotize you into believing you are that voice in the head. And this is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize humor. The awakened person can laugh at their own mind, its absurd fears, its endless commentary, its little melodramas, because they see that the mind is just what the universe is doing at the moment, no more personal than the wind rustling leaves. You don't need to suppress it. You just don't need to believe it. The ego, poor thing, thinks it must hold everything together. It thinks that if it lets go, everything will fall apart, that the universe will collapse without its supervision. But when it finally relaxes, often out of sheer exhaustion, it discovers that life goes on perfectly well without its control. The heart keeps beating, the lungs keep breathing, the stars keep shining, all without your permission. And in that realization comes the great sigh of relief. Ah, I was never in charge anyway. So, when the ego fights back, don't fight it in return. Thank it for its service, bow to it, and let it rest. It was never your enemy, only your costume. And when you stop identifying with it, you find that it dissolves not in battle, but in laughter. For you can't truly lose something that was never separate from you. The dreamer and the dream were one all along. And so, when the noise of striving fades, when the ego's protest grows tired, and the dust of searching begins to settle, something very gentle starts to appear. Not a vision, not a revelation, not angels bursting through the clouds, but something far humbler, quieter. The ordinary world begins to shimmer. You notice the way sunlight falls through the window and dances on the floor. You hear the sound of your own breathing, and it seems as mysterious as the birth of a star. A leaf trembles in the wind, and you find yourself utterly still, watching, not thinking about the leaf, not naming it, not classifying it, but simply seeing it as it is. And for a moment, the whole universe looks back through that leaf. This is the quiet miracle of awakening. It's not what you gain, it's what stops being overlooked. All along, you've been surrounded by miracles, so obvious they'd become invisible. The taste of water, the rhythm of footsteps, the warmth of another hand, simple things, perfectly miraculous. But we were too busy managing life to actually live it. When you really awaken, there isn't a trumpet announcing it. The divine doesn't issue you a certificate or send a beam of light through the ceiling. No, it simply is. It's the taste of tea, the sound of traffic, the feeling of your own pulse. And suddenly, all these little forgotten things begin to glow from the inside out, because now you're seeing them without the lens of commentary. The miracle was never hidden, only filtered through thought. Do you see how beautifully ironic this is? People climb mountains, fast in caves, recite scriptures, sit for years on meditation cushions, all to find something that was never missing. You cannot arrive at the present, you can only notice you never left, and that noticing is the essence of grace. Watch a small child at play. A child does not meditate to be present, they are presence. They crouch before a puddle, staring at their reflection, utterly enchanted, utterly here. Then they grow up and learn to trade that wonder for seriousness. They learn that puddles are just water, that butterflies are just insects, and that silence is just nothing. And so the world dims, not because it lost its light, but because we began to think instead of see. But then something curious happens on the path. After years of searching for enlightenment as a grand prize, you stumble upon the same puddle again. You look, and suddenly it takes your breath away. You see ripples of sky, a whole universe in a few inches of water, and the child in you laughs because you realize the secret. It never stopped being holy. This is why truly awakened people are often the simplest. They don't boast, they don't preach, they don't collect disciples like trophies. They walk the dog, make breakfast, pay the bills, but there's a stillness about them, a kind of transparency, as if they're not distracted by the story anymore. They see no division between sacred and mundane, between temple and kitchen. To them, peeling an orange and chanting a mantra are the same act, the universe tasting itself in two different flavors. And so awakening is not an escape from life, it's a return to it. It's the rediscovery that this, just this, is enough. You don't need more holiness in your life. You need more immediacy. You need to feel your feet on the floor, your lungs rising and falling, the pulse of this astonishing now. That's where eternity hides in plain sight. We often imagine enlightenment as a climb to the mountaintop, but the truth is, it's a coming down back into the marketplace, back into the laughter, the chores, the rain. It's finding the infinite in doing the dishes, the eternal in a friend's voice, the divine in a cat stretching in the sunlight. Because when you see clearly, nothing is ordinary. Everything is saturated with the same luminous awareness that once seemed so far away. The miracle is not that we become something greater, it's that we finally see what we've been all along. Life doesn't change, your eyes do. And when they open, even slightly, you find that paradise was never lost. It was just hidden behind the veil of should and later. So, the awakened person does not walk around in constant ecstasy. They walk around in constant reality, which is far more astonishing. They don't float above the world, they sink into it, like a hand into water. And in that sinking, everything that once seemed trivial becomes unspeakably sacred. You look around and whisper, "My God, it was always this." You know, one of the strangest illusions we ever invented is this thing we call time. We speak of it as though it were a river flowing from past to future, carrying us helplessly along. We say, "I'm running out of time," or "I don't have time," as if time was something that could be kept in a jar or spent like money. But you can never actually find time, can you? Try to hold it. Try to point to it. It slips right through your fingers because there's no such thing as time apart from this moment. The past, you see, is a memory, a trace of the present. The future is an anticipation, a thought appearing now. Both exist only here, in this ever-living instant. And yet, we spend most of our lives everywhere except here. We replay what has been and rehearse what might be, all the while missing what is. We imagine that life is a journey from birth to death, from ignorance to enlightenment. But if you watch carefully, you'll see that there's no traveler on that road. There's only movement, only change, happening now. The notion of before and after are just ways of describing motion within the present. You can never step out of the now, no matter how hard you try. And this, perhaps, is the great joke of awakening. We search for the eternal as though it were hiding in some distant dimension, when in truth, the eternal is not endless duration, it is the absence of duration altogether. Eternity isn't an infinite stretch of time, it's the realization that now is infinite. It has no beginning, no end, no edge. This moment is not part of time. Time is something imagined within this moment. It's rather like the relationship between the waves and the sea. Each wave imagines it's traveling somewhere toward some final destination. But the sea doesn't move, it only waves. In the same way, life doesn't move through time, time moves through life. You, my friend, are not a creature crawling through a sequence of seconds. You are the field in which seconds appear and vanish like bubbles. Think of your heartbeat. It doesn't remember the last beat or anticipate the next one, it only beats now. The breath doesn't rehearse its rhythm, it simply happens. So too with the entire cosmos. Stars explode, trees grow, civilizations rise and fall, all within one eternal pulsation. The whole show is the universe breathing. But we, clever little creatures that we are, keep inventing calendars and clocks to measure what cannot be measured. We divide eternity into slices, label them past, present, and future, and then get terribly upset when our slice doesn't line up with our expectations. We tell ourselves stories like, "One day I'll be enlightened," or "I should have awakened by now." We can, and all the while, we are standing in the very presence we're longing for, missing it because we're too busy thinking about it. The awakened person has simply stopped believing in the story of time, not because they've gone mad, but because they've seen through the illusion. They still use clocks, of course, to make tea, to catch a train, but they no longer believe that life is unfolding somewhere else. They know that reality only ever unfolds now, and because of that, they stop hurrying. They stop trying to get ahead. They rest in the great stillness that moves everything. You see, the only way to miss the present is to imagine there's another moment that's more important. But the past is gone and the future never arrives. It's always this. And so, every moment is the first and last moment of your life. When you truly see that, you can't help but live differently. You stop postponing joy. You stop waiting for enlightenment to begin. You start dancing with what's here because there's nothing else to dance with. Now, some people say, "But surely I must plan for the future." Of course, you can plan, you can dream, design, build, but understand that the planning also happens now. The dreaming is a current experience. Even the anxiety about tomorrow is a sensation in this moment. There is never a time when you are not here. So, awakening to the eternal now is not a philosophy, it's an immediate discovery. It's the shock of realizing that you have never left home, that all the seeking, all the progress, all the moments you thought were leading somewhere were simply different patterns of one infinite unfolding. And when this really sinks in, you laugh because there's nothing to achieve, nowhere to go, nothing to become. You are already the happening itself. To live in the now doesn't mean freezing the flow or ignoring the past and future. It means recognizing that they are movements of the same timeless field. You can still remember and imagine, but you do so playfully, without getting lost in the story. Like watching clouds drift across a clear sky, you don't hold on to them, and you don't wish them away. And what's left when you no longer chase time? Peace, a vast, easy stillness that needs no improvement. You realize that life has never been about arriving, it's about unfolding, and the unfolding has no destination. It's the music of existence, always beginning, never ending. So don't ask, how much time will it take to awaken? Instead, see that awakening is already here, before the question, beneath the question, inside the breath that asks it. There has only ever been this shimmering, eternal now, and in that now, everything you were ever searching for is already singing. You see, one of the grandest misunderstandings in human life is our belief that opposites are at war. We imagine that light must conquer darkness, good must defeat evil, life must triumph over death, as if the universe were some kind of cosmic boxing match. But awakening shows us something astonishing. There is no fight at all. There is only a dance, a graceful movement of contrast that gives shape to the whole. You can't have one pole without the other. There is no mountain without the valley, no wave without the trough, no self without the other. We think of them as opposites, but they are really two sides of the same coin, spinning together so quickly that only the illusion of separation remains. It's rather like listening to a melody. The notes mean nothing without the silences in between. You need both sound and pause, motion and stillness, being and non-being. Without that interplay, there would be no rhythm, no form, no life at all. We say we want happiness without sadness, peace without conflict, creation without destruction. But imagine such a world where it's always light, never dark, always summer, never winter. It wouldn't be heaven, it would be unbearable, because contrast is what gives life its color, its texture, its music. The two sides are not enemies, they define each other. When you truly see this, you stop trying to edit the universe. You stop trying to pull half the tapestry out because you don't like the dark threads. You realize the dark threads are what make the light ones shine. You understand that birth and death, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, they are not linear events to be judged, but complementary movements of one eternal pulse, like breathing in and breathing out. They depend on each other. The ego, of course, doesn't like this. It wants to pick a side, to cling to pleasure and flee from pain. But the moment you cling to one, you create the other. You cannot hold on to up without creating down. You cannot fix joy in place without giving birth to sorrow. They chase each other forever, like a cat and its tail. The Taoists understood this beautifully. They drew it as a circle, yin and yang, each side containing a seed of the other. Look closely. In the heart of the white swirl is a black dot, and in the black swirl a white dot. It means that when something reaches its extreme, it begins to turn into its opposite. Day becomes night, night becomes day. You fall in love and discover fear of loss. You grieve and discover tenderness. Each side births the other endlessly, because they were never two to begin with. So the awakened person doesn't struggle to stay on the positive side of life. They ride the wave up and down, high and low, knowing that both belong to the motion of the sea. They feel joy fully, sorrow fully, anger, laughter, silence, all of it. But they don't cling to any of it, because they know it's all music. They let life play its symphony without insisting that every note be cheerful. This is why the awakened are not grim ascetics or one-note saints. They can laugh at funerals and weep at weddings. They are free to feel everything because they no longer fear what feelings mean. They know that suffering is not a mistake. It's part of the texture of love. They know that without loss, there could be no appreciation, and without death, there could be no wonder at life. It's the same principle you see in art. A painter doesn't fill a canvas with only white. They use shadow and contrast to make the image come alive. Music isn't made of endless high notes. It needs the low ones to give depth. And life, too, needs its shadows to be seen at all. So, what happens when you stop fighting the opposites? You begin to dance with them. You discover that pain and pleasure are steps in the same movement, that each sorrow carries the seed of joy, and each joy contains the echo of sorrow. The dance isn't something you control, it's what you are. You are the turning of the wheel, not the passenger on it. When this realization ripens, fear begins to dissolve, especially the fear of loss. You see that nothing ever truly vanishes. It only changes form. Every end is a beginning in disguise. The leaf falls and nourishes the soil. The sunset dies and gives birth to dawn. Even what we call death is only the other face of birth, the inward breath of the same cosmic rhythm. And so, awakening is not about escaping polarity, it's about embracing it. It's about bowing to both the light and the dark with equal reverence. Because once you see that they are two hands of the same dancer, you stop resisting the choreography. You move with it. And in that movement, you discover grace, the effortless flow of existence, playing both sides of the game at once. You see, the universe is not a war between opposites. It's a love affair between complements. And the awakened one is simply the witness who realizes that both the lover and the beloved are the same being, looking into its own eyes. And now we come to one of the most delicious discoveries of awakening, that you are not and never have been in control. This, of course, horrifies the ego at first. It says, if I'm not controlling things, who is? It imagines that if it lets go, everything will collapse into chaos. The universe, it fears, will fall apart without its constant supervision, as if the cosmos itself depends on one small human mind's approval to keep running on schedule. But have you ever noticed that life goes on quite splendidly without your help? Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your cells repair themselves, all without your command. You don't tell your stomach how to digest breakfast or your neurons how to fire when you think of love. Even the thoughts that arise in your head, where do they come from? You don't choose them, not really. They appear, they move, they vanish. And the curious thing is that they do so perfectly well without a manager. The ego, however, loves to take credit. When something goes right, it says, ah, yes, that was me. When something goes wrong, it says, I should have done better. But watch carefully, and you'll see that both success and failure simply happen. They are waves rising and falling in a vast sea of causes and conditions, none of which you can trace completely. You act, but you cannot know how you act. You decide, but you cannot find the decider. You see, the whole universe is doing you. Just as a wave doesn't push itself along the sea, you don't push yourself through life. You are the motion of life, and the idea of being a separate little controller is merely a useful fiction, good for signing contracts, but disastrous for peace of mind. We live under the delusion that freedom means control, that to be free is to have things our way. But real freedom is the opposite. It is the absence of the need to control. It is the recognition that the happening is already perfect, already whole, already moving in harmony with itself. You can resist it if you like, but resistance, too, is part of the flow. You might say, but if I have no control, then I'm just a puppet, aren't I? Not at all. That's still the ego talking, still imagining a me separate from the universe. You are not the puppet. You are the dance itself. You are the energy that moves the strings, the rhythm that animates the play. The controller and the controlled are two aspects of one process. And when you see that, all conflict dissolves. To surrender control is not to fall into helplessness, it is to fall into reality. It's the realization that the wave doesn't need to know how to be a wave. The tree doesn't need a manual on how to grow leaves. The stars don't attend workshops on how to shine. They simply express what they are. And when you stop interfering with yourself, you do the same. You act freely, spontaneously, without calculation, like wind in tall grass. When this sinks in, there is an immense sense of relief. All that tension, all that worry about doing the right thing, all that anxious self-correction, it begins to melt, because you realize there was never a separate you doing anything in the first place. Everything was always being done by the totality through this particular form, in this particular moment. It's like discovering that you've been playing the piano of life with locked wrists, and suddenly the wrists loosen and the music flows by itself. Now, don't mistake this for fatalism. This isn't saying do nothing. It's saying see that everything is being done. Even your effort, even your intention are movements of the same ocean. So you can work, plan, speak, love, create, but without that inner tightness, without the arrogance of believing you're the puppet master. You simply let life express itself as you, and it does so beautifully. This is the freedom of no control. It's not passivity, it's participation without tension. It's surfing the wave rather than trying to command the sea. It's saying yes to the flow, trusting that whatever arises is part of the dance. And because you no longer fight the current, you discover an energy far greater than your own effort. Things move naturally, easily, gracefully. This freedom is also humility. You see that the same intelligence that makes galaxies spiral is beating your heart right now. You realize that the cosmos is breathing through you, thinking through you, weeping and laughing through you. And once that dawns, you no longer feel small. You feel vast, not as a separate being towering over others, but as the very fabric of the whole thing. Then, even the smallest act becomes sacred. Washing dishes, tying shoes, opening a door. It's all the universe moving in exquisite coordination. There's no separate doer, no judge, no guilt, only the flow. And when you finally stop trying to direct that flow, you find you've been carried all along effortlessly, perfectly, home. You see, once you've tasted this freedom, the freedom of no control, the freedom of being the dance instead of the dancer, a marvelous laughter begins to rise because you realize that all along you were never a poor little soul wandering through a hostile universe. You were the universe playing at being lost, just for the fun of finding yourself again. The Hindus call this Lila the divine play. The whole cosmos, from galaxies to grasshoppers, is God playing hide and seek with himself. He hides as you, as me, as every creature that ever was. He forgets on purpose, because without forgetting, there could be no surprise. And without surprise, there could be no joy. Imagine it for a moment. You are infinite consciousness, endless, eternal, all-knowing. What would you do for eternity? Sooner or later, you'd grow bored of omniscience. You'd say, let's pretend not to know. Let's play a game. Let's pretend to be small, fragile human. Let's see if I can forget who I am and then rediscover it again. And poof, here you are, looking through these eyes, asking, who am I? But of course, you can't really be lost, can you? Because the seeker and the sought are the same thing. It's like a flame searching for fire. The moment you see that, you burst out laughing because the game has given itself away. The universe, you see, was never serious about this at all. It's playing joyfully, artistically, wildly. It's pretending to be you so that it can experience the thrill of becoming itself once more. And this is why the awakened laugh, not a cynical laugh, not a cruel laugh, but a laugh of pure delight. They laugh because they see through the cosmic charade. They see that the wars, the tears, the triumphs, the heartbreaks, all of it is the one self-exploring its own infinite creativity. They see that even ignorance is part of wisdom. Even confusion is part of clarity. That the mistake was never a mistake at all, but a twist in the dance. God, if you like, is not a stern judge sitting on a throne. He is the actor, the playwright, and the audience, all at once. He is playing every role, hero and villain, saint and sinner, the one who builds and the one who breaks. And he's doing it not to punish or test himself, but because that's what life is, the play of form, the eternal game of contrast. When you really see this, you stop taking yourself so damn seriously. You can be kind without being solemn, spiritual without being self-righteous. You see that laughter is closer to God than piety, because laughter is free, and the whole point of the play was always freedom. Think of children at play, how seriously they pretend. One is the king, another the dragon, another the knight in shining armor. They fight their battles and cry their tears, utterly absorbed in the story. But when the game ends, they drop their swords, smile, and run off to dinner together. That's what enlightenment is, remembering it was all a magnificent game, and everyone was in on it from the start. And then, once you know that, what do? Do you stop playing? No, you play even better. You play with grace, with style, with compassion. You love more deeply because you know that every face is your own. You laugh more easily because you see that nothing was ever truly at stake. And you cry more freely too, because even sorrow is sacred. Every emotion, every breath, every ordinary moment is the divine winking at itself. This is why the wise appear so light. They are not floating above life, they are fully in it, dancing. They chop wood, carry water, fall in love, stub their toes, pay their taxes, but they do it with a sparkle in the eye, because they know the secret. There was never anything to win or lose. The whole adventure was God, pretending to be human, pretending to forget, so he could taste the ecstasy of remembering. And now, perhaps, the remembering has happened here, in this breath, this hearing, this awareness. For the truth, you see, is not something you achieve. It's what was listening all along. You were never on the outside, knocking on heaven's door. You were the door, the knocking, and the one who opened. So what can be said at the end of all this? Perhaps only this: relax, laugh, stop trying to hold the ocean in a bucket. You are it, the whole ocean, pretending to be a drop. for the sheer joy of splashing. And maybe, just maybe, that's what enlightenment really is. Not an escape, not an ending, but the simplest of recognitions that life is God playing hide and seek with himself. And the punchline of the whole joke is that there was never anyone else here at all. And when you see that, truly see it, the universe sighs and laughs and begins again.